In this lesson we'll set up the shader for this cheese wedge. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this cheese shader. We're going to apply this to the wedge, and we're going to apply a displacement to this to give the indication of the cheese detail. Okay, so let's have a look at duplicating this first of all. I'm going to just open up the hypershade, and just take the cheese, which we haven't named properly. So this is the AI skin 1. Just going to name that to cheese shader. Okay, and then we'll duplicate that. So I'm just going to say edit, duplicate, shading network. Make sure you do shading network so that you get all of these noise nodes and everything. If you don't do shading network, you won't get that. Okay, so let's go ahead and rename this guy, this new one, so cheese shader 1. Let's just rename that to cheese wedge, so we know that it's the cheese wedge. There we go. And let's just apply this. So I'm just going to go over here and just middle mouse button it onto there. And let's just see what that looks like. I'm going to keep this up, I'll just minimize this for now. Okay, looks like that didn't apply, or maybe it hasn't updated, so let's try updating the scene. Just going to do a region here because we don't need to see all of this stuff. So it doesn't look like it's applied, so I'll just right click on this. Oops. Assign existing material cheese wedge. There we go. Okay, so that's pretty boring. It's just got the standard shader on there, it's a cheese shader. So we need to have some detail in there. So we're going to apply a displacement to this, and you do that in the regular Maya way in terms of applying the displacement. So everything that you know about displacements in Maya is the same in Arnold. I'm just going to show you some of the parameters you use to control the detail. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the hypershade and grab this cheese wedge shader, graph it. I'll just close this to make it a bit bigger. There we go. Let's move this up. Okay, so you just go to the shading group here, and then in the displacement material you just click there. And what we're going to use is a 3D texture, and we're going to use the marble texture. So this marble texture will give us that detail of the cheese going inwards. So these black areas will go inwards. So I'm just going to click on that. And we're just going to go into the marble texture and just make the vein black rather than red. Okay, and then let's just have a look at what this looks like. So we've got let me just close this hypershade here. I think it's doing something funny. That's better. Alright. Okay, so by default this is displacing the object, and you can see that it's got quite a lot of polygons in there already. So this has got quite a lot of polygons. So it's kind of trying to do its best to form that shape. Also, you might have noticed that it's coming outwards, and that's kind of what you would expect. By default, all displacements with the procedural shaders go outwards, so they're positive. So in order to make them positive and negative, you need to offset that value by the amount of the alpha gain. Okay, so let me just show you what I mean. So inside the marble, if you look at the color balance, this alpha value is how big the displacement is going to be. If you zoom in here, you can see the out alpha is connected to displacement. So this black and white image is basically what's controlling that displacement. So what we need to do is adjust the amount that it goes in and out, and we need to adjust the offset. So this is going out by 1 unit. So if we bring that back by half a unit, that means that we can go in and out. Okay, so if that's if we wanted it to be exactly, going in and out the exact same amount. But let's just see what it looks like in the viewport. At the moment it looks terrible, so let's just, I think we should be able to do it in here, in the channel box here. So alpha offset is here, and I'm just going to change that to maybe -0.8, and I need to, if I press pause here, it may help. Yeah, there we go. It's trying to update this and it's trying to update this at the same time, so it's not really having much luck. Okay, so that's giving you some sort of detail there. So what I'm going to do is add more detail by allowing the cheese to kind of subdivide. So I'm going to add those subdivision parameters. So if I just select this guy, the cheese wedge, click on it here maybe, go to the attributes, okay, let me just move this out of the way so it gets less complicated. So I've got my attribute editor. I'm going to go to the shape node here, and we'll go to the Arnold parameters, come down, and the subdivisions, I'm just going to change this to Catmull Clark, and we'll just add another iteration there. So this is going to basically subdivide this polygon mesh twice, and so those extra polygons are going to be displaced into the shape here. Okay, so that's pretty frequent at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this up. So I'm going to scale up the texture. So remember, 3D textures are basically controlled by a placement node, so this place 3D node, and the bigger this node is, the bigger the texture will be. So we're just going to take that and we'll just scale this to maybe three times. Might need to update the scene here. That's better. Might be a bit too big there, so we change this down to 2. Update the scene. Okay, so the shape of this is changing a bit too much. So let me just show you some parameters that you have on the shape node here for the shader. So if I click on this and go back to this area here, you can see we've got some displacement attributes. So this is the same as the alpha gain. So height is the same as alpha gain. So if I wanted less displacement, I could say half that, for example, and I'm going to get less displacement there. Let's just update the scene to make sure that that is the case. There we go. So now you can see that it's not going in as much. And if you wanted to, you could actually change this 0 value. So this is the offset, so we can bring it in or out. So let's say we wanted to bring this out a little bit. We could say take all those values and push them out by maybe 0.2. And then we could see what that looks like. So the difference here is this is per object. So you can have one displacement shader, and then you can adjust maybe the height per object. So for example, if you had a displacement for a rock, for example, you could have 3 different rocks and you can have a different height for each rock so that it looks slightly different. So that's quite handy. Okay, so that's coming out a little bit. And then we've also got bounds padding. Bounds padding is basically telling Arnold to look further out than the object for rendering. So sometimes when you displace something, you displace it like way out here, and Arnold will not be looking for that. We will not be looking for the object there because the bounding box is just around here. So it's just going to render it around there. So you can actually pad that bounding box and add to it. So if you ever see the displacement getting cut off, you can try changing this value. Let's have a look at what happens if we just change this to 1. Remember, that uses more memory, so you have to be careful with it. I don't think it's cutting off anything here, so it's not going to make any difference. So this stuff here looks like it's kind of intersecting itself. That's why it's going black. So the faces are going through themselves. So let me just try and fix that. I'm going to maybe bring these out a bit more. Let's just see if this is working. If I change this out to 1, it should be back to the way it was before. So update foreseen, and it should come out a fair bit. There you go. Let's try minus 0.1. Yeah, just trying to get rid of that black thing that was there. That's better. Okay, so let's have a look at this, the whole thing. So I'm just going to change my marquee here and just make it a bit bigger. While that's rendering, let me just show you this auto bump. If you tick that on, if you've got a high frequency displacement map, something with lots of noise in it, what you can do is you can turn this on, and basically Arnold will not add polygons to describe that surface. What it will do instead is it will use a bump map. So the bits that are higher frequency, like these little dots, it will create a bump map for that rather than making a displacement. Obviously a bump map does not cast shadows or receive shadows, so you've got to be careful with this. It's just for higher frequency things, and sometimes it can save you time. I don't often use this very much. Maybe change this a bit more. Okay, so I've just changed my iterations to 3 so I get a bit more detail there. Okay, if you want to play with the shader, the texture, it's a good idea if you want to get a different look. So you can see this is quite broken up, but you can get a different look by adjusting the marble texture. So if I go down to I'll just select this guy, and well, let's just go to the hypershade, and it's easier to see. So this marble texture here, minimize that. And so what we can do, this is the color that we're getting. What we can do is we can make the vein thinner. So this vein width, if you just slide that down and watch that, you can see it gets thinner. Okay, and then let me just keep that so you can see. So then you can also change the diffusion. So this kind of extra noise here, I don't know if you can see that extra gray noise, just a very subtle gray noise, it's not white. You can actually minimize that, so all this stuff will go away. So as you slide this down, that stuff's going to disappear. Let me just make it a bit more noticeable. There we go. So then you'll just get these little channels going through. Okay, so you can change the vein width, the diffusion, and the contrast here as well. So if you want it to be less detail as well, so you can just increase that, and you're going to get harsher kind of details there. Okay, so it depends on what you're going for. I'm going to keep that image. Let's just compare. I think I'm going to put a little bit of diffusion in there. So I'm going to just add a bit of, I need to just change this first. There we go. And let's just put, not too much, just a little bit of detail there. That's it. And I also might want to just scale this up again, maybe might just change this back to 3, change the vein width down a bit, maybe make that a little bit tighter. There we go, something like that. Okay, so you can use this procedural texture to kind of adjust the look of these kind of veins here. You can scale it up and down using the placement node. You can change these values, and you can control how much displacement you want using either the alpha gain here, so in the color balance here you've got alpha gain, or you can go to the object and come into the shape node, and you can just change the height here as well, and you can offset it using this 0 value as well. Just so you know, the displacement shader also has those values in there as well, so if you wanted to change it in the displacement shader, the Arnold section has bounce padding and 0 scalar value as well, so you can basically offset your results using this 0 scalar value as well. Okay, so I'm just going to save the scene there. In this lesson we set up our cheese wedge shader, and we put a marble texture, 3D texture, into the displacement map.